Hello and welcome back to Every Horror Movie on Netflix, the show where we watch, review, and most importantly discuss every horror movie on Netflix. As always, I'm Steve and I'm here with my faithful co-hosts Patrick.
Hello.
And Chris.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing great. So we're here today to discuss Mary Lambert's Pet Sematary 2, 1992 film. But before we get into it, we've got some kind of historic news to reflect on, boys. We just did our first convention, Motor City Nightmares, in Novi, Michigan. And what a blast. What a resounding success. I'm still kind of coming down from it. How are you guys feeling?
I was stunned by how sad I was to leave there. Like, I almost cried on the way home. I didn't want to leave. I wanted it to be another day longer. It was just so much fun being around shit I like and people who like shit I like and hanging out with you guys all weekend and partying like motherfuckers both Friday and Saturday nights and meeting so many new friends. It was a great time. I honestly can't wait to do another one.
Yeah, I definitely am also experiencing the sort of emotional come down, having to return to your normal life, which isn't half as magical, trying to hold on to whatever pieces of the experience I can and incorporate them into my day-to-day life and failing. But it was a good weekend. It was good to see everybody. Hopefully we got some new listeners. So if you were at Motor City Nightmares and you're listening to the show for the first or second or third time, we're glad to have you. Thanks for checking us out. And, you know, I think we all had some really fun, discoveries of different things, whether they be artists or, Patrick and I saw the best rock band in the country.
I want to talk about the Cult of Space Skull. Of the, I'm going to say, and I need at some point to actually draw up my list of my favorite shows I've ever been to, but I feel confident saying that seeing the Cult of Space Skull at the Motor City Nightmares after party is on my list of the top 50 shows I've ever been to, maybe top 25.
That does not sound like much of an endorsement.
I've seen a lot of shows. Yeah.
Patrick,
I've seen a lot of fucking shows.
You're one of my 50 best friends, so that works out.
I see 50.
Not even top 8, damn.
I see 50 shows in a given year. So this is not, you know, this is real. This is the real shit. We saw
the real shit.
I mean, it was like part heavy metal band, part punk band, and part just like satanic like pro wrestling kayfabe shit. Like they were lopping heads off, they were killing zombie possums, we were hunting ghosts. Chris led a fucking cult procession while he was holding up the severed head of the drummer. It was amazing.
The drummer was still killing the kit even after they sawed his head off.
Incredible.
It's great. It's like a 80% theater performance, 20% music performance. But do not miss them if they are in your area, or more likely if you're in Michigan and you happen to see them playing locally.
I
fantastic.
feel like they're a relatively new arrival on the scene here because I had never heard of them before, and they live. They're from very close to where the convention was, but holy shit, they were amazing. I think the entire crowd was also very much in their corner, and I would love to see them go on to play some more cons and maybe get a national following because they were incredible. I was slipping around in fake blood, dancing and just fucking moshing it up at the end. I think there's still blood on my chucks.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this nationally and you're planning a trip to Michigan, maybe to see some of our beautiful attractions like the world-famous Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, maybe Mackinac Island, maybe many of the other things that Pure Michigan has to offer, plan your trip around the next Cult of Space Skull show, and you will not be disappointed.
I mean,
fantastic.
I think Chris and I are going to see them again this weekend, right?
We very well might be, yeah.
I mean, I am. I don't know if Chris is. But
I'm planning on it.
Yeah,
so yeah.
It's
great, and I'd love to see them, get a following and become a national act, as long as they don't lose their their direction. I would love to see what they could do with like a $20,000 budget.
we were astonished. I mean, we were prepared for like, the decent, fun band, whatever, at the after party, and me and Chris just kept looking at each other with like our eyes bugging out of our fucking heads at how batshit this performance was. So yeah,
it's at the end of the year we do our favorite horror discovery of the year. I will be shocked if this is not mine and Patrick's favorite horror discovery of the year.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Calling it now.
For sure. Steven, how was your con experience now that we've talked about Space Skull for 15 minutes?
For the third time. Yeah, I had a great experience.
But the first time to our listeners.
Sure. I'm glad you guys had a great time. I'll be catching them soon. They've got a few shows coming up. I'm sure I can make it to one, and I hope to have a blast. But it was just, it's always great to go to these. I love cons, even if they're anime cons, which I've gone to before. I like being around, nerdy outsiders. They tend to be, it tends to be a very kind of like sweet, inclusive sort of space. Even with something like horror, a lot of people I work with assume that I must be some kind of maniac because I love horror movies and I do this podcast. Turns out, like, some of the nicest people I've ever met have made some of the most, like, fucked up shit I've ever experienced. And, just had a great time vibing. Chris made a wonderful game for our booth, and I felt like a game show host, introducing people to the show, watching them try and play through this thing, matching up Chris's hilarious descriptions of movies we've reviewed with their titles. We brought in some prizes on the second day, including Chris's collection of Star Wars Insider magazines.
Got rid of them all. I'm so happy.
Yeah, and a real treat for me was meeting a representative for, longtime listeners will know I love the restoration company Vinegar Syndrome and their rep,
What?
Jenny. We had a great time getting to know each other over the course of the convention, and hopefully there'll be some more news coming out of that soon. I might be reviewing some more Vinegar Syndrome movies on the show. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So, can't wait for our next con, but for now, let's get to the matter at hand. Pet Sematary 2, the sequel no one asked for. You guys have not seen. We saw the remake together, right? But you guys have not seen Mary Lambert's original Pet Sematary adaptation with a screenplay by Stephen King, correct?
She directed the original?
Yes.
I felt like I looked this up and she didn't.
Well,
no, she did.
She did.
Oh, okay.
And it's odd because at this point, there's 60, 70 Stephen King adaptations. I can only think of 2 that were directed by a woman, and they happen to be these 2 films. So I've long been kind of intrigued by this one in particular because it was a blind spot for me.
I am a fan of Pet Sematary, the franchise. I really like the book, and well, I guess that's about it, huh? We saw the movie remake, and it was, fine, I guess. And then we saw, I've never seen the first movie, so I was very interested to see things I recognized from the book and everything interpreted in this movie, and to kind of have the suggestion of what the first Pet Sematary movie was like, even though I haven't seen it, and like what the depiction of the titular Pet Sematary was.
It's pretty much
movie.
exactly the same. I've not read the book. I've wanted to. It's Stephen King and his wife Tabitha, who's his first reader. He didn't want to put this thing out for years because they both thought it was just too dark and too nasty and too hopeless. And I definitely think the Pet Sematary remake leans further into the nastiness and the hopelessness, more so than Lambert's first film does. That said, the first Pet Sematary movie, I have a couple of strong memories from seeing it as a kid. There's some pretty fucked up images in it, but it mostly plays like a higher level made for TV movie. It's not great. You're not missing a whole lot, but I'd recommend throwing it on while you're doing laundry or something.
Mm-hmm. I actually thought it was a made-for-TV movie. I only recently realized it was a theatrical release at all.
Yeah, so, for the uninitiated, we'll just get this out of the way. I don't know what you're doing here unless you just like listening to our voices, but if you know nothing about Pet Sematary, There's a pet cemetery. Behind it, an Indian burial ground. Whatever you bury there comes back to life, but it's not quite the same as you remember it.
Yep, and sometimes dead is better.
Sometimes dead is better. At the end of this movie, you're going to get a zombie screaming that at you. Just to further hammer the point home.
And it's really, I mean, the dead is better thing, it's really a book, and I guess a movie about grief, and I really appreciate the themes in it, and I appreciate, that burying people in the cemetery is a bad fucking idea, but time after time, characters just can't resist because the pain of being without somebody convinces them to take the most sketchy gamble they can possibly make and say, well, this time they'll come out okay, right? They never do.
They never do, and that's going to be a discussion point later on, I think. We're going to get a little personal with this, I'm hoping, but I'll set up Pet Sematary 2. So this movie stars kind of an amazing cast. Edward Furlong, mopey little Eddie Furlong, 13, I think, when this movie was made. Anthony Edwards and Clancy Brown. I think those are our top 3 bills there. And so we open on a very Brian De Palma body double type sequence where we see kind of a gothic horror film being made, and then we hear a director yell, "Cut!" And we realize we're just watching the production of a film. Really bad idea to be when the first line of dialogue in your movie is "cut." I've always found it to be hilarious. Like, I think what is it? A New Nightmare does the same thing.
Yeah. I thought New Nightmare very disappointing to start your movie with a scene that looks like it's a better movie than the movie that you're actually going to watch.
Exactly. So Eddie Furlong is visiting his mom, who's kind of like a famous C-list celebrity from what I'm gathering on what little we're given. She's filming this kind of horror trash. There's an electrical incident, and she is hilariously electrocuted to death. The way this was shot, her lack of horror in her expression and her voice as this draws out for a couple of minutes is really kind of funny. But
it's like the hilarious. Longest electrocution I've ever seen on screen.
I'm not sure what was longer, the shot of the car pulling out of the convenience store in Grandmother's Farm, or the death of this woman as she holds on with a death grip on this iron grate that's being electrified. It went on forever.
Well, and Eddie, I'm just going to call him Eddie like we're friends. His horror and terror of the situation is so believable. It's like the one time in the movie where he really comes alive, and his mom is just like a fucking puppet, barely even emoting as she's dying. I don't know what it feels like to die by electrocution. Maybe you don't have a lot of control over your, expressions or your voice, but it struck me as kind of incongruous. So he and his dad, played by Anthony Edwards, who's a veterinarian, they take the body back home to Maine to be buried. They start off in LA, and they kind of try and start their life over again. Their summer house becomes their home. They hire a live-in maid for some reason, which is really weird because they're just two healthy people in a house that is not that large by themselves, but apparently they need a sexy young woman to be there. It seems 24/7.
I mean, apparently he's like a fucking veterinarian to the stars. Like, this guy is making the big bucks.
Yeah, well, he's not only he's a traveling veterinarian too, which I found to be, I don't know, that probably is a thing, but he's got his own kind of special van that he drives around. He starts over, buys a derelict vet's office that is just in poor repair, in need of a lot of work. Edward Furlong is tasked with cleaning it up so that he can have one of the kittens that they find in the vents of the vet's office. Things are pretty quaint for a while in this movie, I think. We don't really get a lot of horror until quite a bit later. We just kind of see, father and son adjusting to this new town. Edward Furlong starts going to school. He brings his kitten to class, and what I found to be a pretty hilarious and unnecessary moment. We meet, because it's Stephen King had nothing to do with this, but it feels pretty Stephen King because we have cartoonish bullies, the leader of which, the least intimidating character in the film, I think, takes the kitten. They go off on a chase to the pet cemetery. We think the kitten has been killed by the bully. It turns out he's alive, and that is our gateway for our young protagonist to learn about the myth of this Native American burial ground that we were introduced to in the book in the first film.
I just want to say really quickly, because this episode just came out, but, we're going to be talking about the Indian burial ground element of this movie quite a bit. And the Faculty of Horror podcast, which I know at least Stephen and I are friends of, just released last week, I think, a review of Amityville Horror and Poltergeist. And they dive deep into the tropes around the Indian burial ground theme in horror movies and sort of... the problematic associations with them. But that's not what we'll be doing on this show. But if you're interested in that sort of topic, and check them out.
Well, I really want to listen to that up, Chris. Thanks for mentioning that. And, I don't have a lot to back this up, but I heard on a podcast recently that mentioned the first film that King actually based the burial ground and everything like on an actual tribe, and there's like kind of a political nature, I think, to the way that he discusses it in the book. And it sounds like it might be kind of woke in a way that I would not expect from King, he doesn't do well with other cultures and people who are not white generally.
Yeah, I don't remember it being woke in the book, but my memory could be wrong.
Yeah, anyway, so how else to even discuss this movie? Because, spoiler alert, this is a just completely misguided effort from top to bottom. And I don't want to get too deep into the plot, but we've at least got to set up all the characters. So, Edward Furlong makes a best friend in this who has an adorable dog, a Siberian Husky, I think, named Zowie. And as soon as we see an animal in this movie, you just assume it's gonna get buried and come back as a zombie. That tracks.
Yeah, and there's just we just spend a lot of time just kind of meeting all the people in town who end up becoming parts of plots or subplots. So you got Eddie and his dad, of course, and their housekeeper. You have the bullies and the one friend that Eddie makes at school. His one friend has a mom and a stepdad who happens to be the town sheriff named Gus, who's kind of introduced early on. He's in the 40% of police officers who are domestic abusers. He is. The first thing you see him do is like tell Anthony Edwards about how he used to date the dead wife.
Right.
In hometown.
Oh, I love that scene. So this is Clancy Brown, who his performance in this is, I love him.
Amazing.
I love him. I think he's absolutely awful in this, but I don't blame him. I blame the material. I think he's doing the best he can. I don't know. He could have done a better Maine accent. That was pretty distracting to me at times. But that scene is fucking hilarious because he shows up at the funeral and he's like, "Yeah, your mom and I used to go together. Homecoming, prom, the whole 9 yards." And it's like, why are you just telling this kid I could have been your dad? What the fuck?
Okay, yeah. I was very confused by this character at a sexual level. Because
I thought that was pretty clear. Do say more.
Because I love Clancy Brown. I think he's a very talented character actor and voice actor, but I'm used to him being kind of a dumpy, like dour looking older guy. I was not prepared for like fit, sexy, nice hair, young Clancy Brown, honestly looking super hot, but also playing this absolutely awful character. There were just layers upon layers of confusion to this for me.
I've heard that from several people who have seen this movie, and I don't get it. To me, he looks kind of yellowy and pasty. He's got kind of a little bit of a gut.
He looks fit as fuck. I mean, maybe not fit as fuck. I would not say
maybe
he had
fitter
a gut,
than you would
though.
Expect him to be.
Patrick just loves a man in uniform.
A man in uniform who also, this is just such a weird touch in this movie that I would love to listen to the commentary or something and find out how this came to be. But he also breeds rabbits and seems to get off on it. There's like a shot of like we find this out by like we there's a close-up shot of rabbits fucking and then a cut to him just staring at them gleefully before Gus shows up, and he's got this whole side hustle with this giant rabbit hutch that's electrified in his backyard.
You know, he's a multi-hyphenate, Steven. You gotta have a side hustle to make your way in this economy.
Let me ask, you know, I don't know about $1992. I'm not sure if you guys do either. Is $10 a good price for a rabbit?
Oh my God, I have no idea. Is that how much they cost in the movie?
Yeah, he's got this like homemade wooden sign in front of his dilapidated house.
I mean, it sounds like a steal, honestly.
I think that's probably right, especially in like 1992. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know.
Man, those poor rabbits, though. Those rabbits undergo a lot of shit.
Oh, yeah, they do. We'll save that for the spoiler room. But, you know, again, when you see an animal in a Pet Sematary movie, you expect it's going to die in a horrific way and come back even more horrifically. To mixed results in this film, of course. So Gus's stepson just has he's got a rough lot in life because his douchebag cop dad treats him horribly, takes food off his plate, calls him fat repeatedly throughout the film, is trying to fuck his mom right in front of him.
Oh, I mean,
like,
it's honestly...
at dinner.
It's honestly hilarious. Like, I mean, yes.
Yeah, it's so over the top.
I mean, it's, yes, abuse, and I guess it's upsetting on one level, but it's basically just, like, really over the top writing to a degree that is pretty funny. Just the way they drive home what a shithead this guy is, particularly to the kid.
I think where things really kind of take off is when Clancy Brown and the mom are trying to have aggressive drunken sex, like apparently they usually do every night, and the dog is fucking around with the rabbits. You know, we hear the electrical pops, whatever, and he's just had it. He goes downstairs with the gun. He says he's warned Drew enough about the dog. Manages to kill it in one shot without any visibility, which I found to be very impressive. Yes.
Yeah, this is like some sharpshooter shit. Like Chris Kyle has fucking nothing on Clancy Brown in Pet Sematary 2.
Yeah, pretty unceremoniously brutal scene. Then the movie gets even more 90s than it's been already when we get this kind of weepy ballad as Drew is sitting against a tree holding the dog. And I gotta say, that is some great dog acting. I believe that dog was dying in his arms.
It was amazing. You don't see that often. I mean, because the dog gets murked in like the kind of the upper leg, like the thighs area, sort of. And it's pretty decent, like makeup on the dog. And you get a lot of shots, not just like a single shot where they got a decent take where the dog was like, I guess, giving a decent performance. I mean, they probably just like doped the dog up on fucking Benadryl or something. But I mean, the dog does seem to be fading away. And if you have any doubt, even after seeing this convincing canine performance, as to whether the dog is fading away, just consult the musical cue, which, if I remember correctly, the lyric, like the refrain that's repeated multiple times is, I'm fading away. Fading away.
Yep, yeah. Over and over and over again with guitar with so much chorus on it and drum hits you can land a plane on. It's amazing.
The music throughout this movie was just phenomenal.
Incredible.
In all the worst ways.
So not only do you get, bullshit butt rock like Better Than Ezra, but this soundtrack has L7, Jesus and Mary Chain.
The Jesus and Mary Chain cue is also hilarious and on the nose in a really funny way, but I think that's probably spoiler room material.
Yeah, this took me back to Fear Street Part 1, 1994 quite a bit with the soundtrack. Like, obviously no big massive hits in this, but the music is used in a similar way, like hey, it's the 90s, and also this song is speaking to exactly what's happening on the screen right now.
And I don't know if this was a band that you know, but there was something I can only describe as knockoff Guns N' Roses that plays when Eddie Furlong is like in a bike chase with the bullies.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel like they're just trying to copy Terminator 2 here, where Eddie Furlong just bikes around listening to Guns N' Roses for 15 minutes.
Well, the thing about Eddie Furlong is he only does movies that have dirt bikes in them.
Yeah.
That was his niche in the 90s.
It's just what you get when you're a child actor in the 90s.
Yeah, so of course, what do? This dog is so beloved by everyone that we've encountered except for Clancy Brown. They take it to the pet cemetery. Eddie Furlong just agrees wholesale without any question. Watching Drew carry this obviously stuffed dog through the rough terrain, into the backwoods was so funny to me. The moment where it's clear that it has no weight to it whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Maybe we're supposed to think he's kind of a big kid. Maybe it's like nothing to him to pick this up. It still doesn't work on that level. But the moment we see the dog puppet hit the earth at the pet cemetery, I screamed out loud because you can just tell it's a stuffed animal just flopped down on the dirt. This movie is shoddy in so many ways that, just put some rocks in that thing or something. Give it a little weight. Come on. How much effort would it take? And what do you know? The dog comes back. He looks malevolent as fuck, and nobody seems to notice except for the two kids.
And people who know they're watching a Pet Sematary movie. I'm not sure if the kids even notice that the dog's malevolent. That's kind of a recurring theme where characters in this movie don't really notice that people are obviously fucked up and evil.
Well, yeah, totally. But, Drew notices because... This gave me a huge laugh, too, when Anthony Edwards shows up in his mobile vet van to take a look at the dog. Drew, he looks guilty the moment the dog comes in the house and you see its red eyes, and he looks a little bit afraid. And Anthony Edwards says, yeah, I'll take a look at him. And Drew says, can you keep him at your place until he gets better? Like he's clearly pawning the demon dog off on him because he doesn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
I thought that was hilarious.
They don't it's a little spooky when your dog comes back to life. They knew what happened to it.
I was impressed with whatever they did to make it look this spooky. I don't know if it must have been a lighting thing, but its eyes are red a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And it was to me a very effective, disconcerting effect. The dog does some good acting. It was an effectively creepy looking, demon dog, especially in a not pre-CGI age, but there was not any CGI in this movie, I don't think.
Well, it's a great kind of lighting or optical effect. I don't know how they did it with the red eyes, but Lambert did the same thing in the first movie with Church the Cat. There's an iconic shot of the cat looking menacing with these kind of abnormally, eerily yellow eyes. And it's the same sort of thing where it's like they must be shining some kind of special light on the creature that doesn't bleed over onto the fur, but just illuminates the eyes in some way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like it was like rotoscoped on afterward or anything. And It's really haunting stuff.
Yeah. It almost made me go like, can you put contacts on a dog? I don't think that's it. I think it's a lighting thing, but whatever it is, it works well.
Yeah, and I haven't seen the first Pet Sematary movie, but this dog, I don't know. It seems like a dog should be scarier than a cat when it comes back from the dead, but I'm not sure if it was. I think maybe the demeanor of a dog lends itself less to like what was great about Church, where it's like you could just kind of feel a subtle evil inside the cat, at least in the book and in the first movie, or in the remake of the first movie. You have any thoughts on that? Dogs versus cats in the Pet Sematary?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts about this. I've been thinking about this today. So the thing about Church the Cat is I didn't find Church scary in either the first movie or the remake because at the end of the day, zombie or not, he's still just a cat being a cat.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's adorable and he may be evil and hate and trying to kill you, but that's every cat. Right,
but with the dog, I agree with you that he didn't feel... Zombie Zowie didn't feel like all that much more menacing to me as a zombie, but a dog is like, a dog this big is just naturally should be a more physically imposing threat, if nothing else, and I was never really scared of the dog. I still kind of thought he was cute.
And I was rooting for the dog because we want Zowie to have his revenge,
yes,
and kill Gus for killing Zowie.
Well, and we might as well just get to it, right?
So that is what happened.
he kills Gus, and I don't think this movie was on rails to begin with, but if it were, this would be the moment where it fully went off the rails for me. So the kids are out having a little, illicit Halloween party in the Pet Sematary with the bullies. Inexplicably, they start to get along after a bit, and Gus comes. Everybody's screaming, "You fucked the party up, you invited your dad." Of course he didn't invite his dad, the cop. What are you talking about? The dad's unhappy that his son is out late and that his wife lied about it. And Zowie just takes a big bite out of Clancy Brown's jugular, and he's dead. What do the kids decide to do? They just, in my mind, they have it made. This asshole's out of the picture and they're not culpable because, zombie or not, it's very clear that the dog killed him. For some reason, the screenwriter decided that no, they should try and bring him back to life because they feel guilty about this happening, as if they're responsible. And it just doesn't track on any level that you think about it.
I mean, kids are dumb, and we know he's got to make it in the Pet Sematary, so...
Yeah, it made sense to me. I don't know. I didn't have that sense of it going off the rails at all. I mean, I was like, okay, it obviously is a dumb decision, but people make a million dumb decisions in horror movies. This ranks very low on the list of dumbest decisions I've seen in horror movies, I guess.
Yeah. When your leads are children, you can get away with dumb decisions a lot more.
I don't know what a better motivation would have been for them to be like, you know what, we got to bring him back because this could come back to bite us in the ass. Because I could see no way that it could. And yeah, I agree. They're kids. Maybe that's what kids would realistically do. But nobody in this movie is behaving realistically. So I don't need that. It felt very lazy to me, and it's not like I was fully into the experience to begin with. This is pure camp from start to finish. But I thought that was kind of egregious and kind of a harbinger of narrative decisions to come henceforth.
I mean, what do you want? Do you want to not see Clancy Brown as a zombie?
Yeah, I mean, then we wind up with Clancy Brown being a zombie and being a fucking hilariously entertaining villain for the rest of the movie. So I was fine with it.
And that's really kind of when the plot gets into gear.
I didn't come to this movie for fucking Shakespeare. I didn't come to this for fucking, Get Out.
Oh no, I didn't either. I'm just pointing out how dumb it is and how this is what I came for, but also I'm more interested in having heard about this movie for years, I'm more interested in the why and the how, and it was fascinating to me to see I don't know. I don't think there's any way. Well, somebody's going to try soon from what I've heard, or maybe it's in production. I don't see how you can make a good sequel to a film that's based on a book without any involvement from the author, with such loose connections to the source material to begin with. I just delighted in seeing what terrible, stupid decisions they made.
I don't know, Steven, but I mean, I'll tell you that it wasn't in the top 5 bad decisions I had seen in that movie to that point, to be honest.
Oh yeah. So. Well, let's run some of them down.
Eddie Furlong bringing the cat to school.
Oh yeah, so dumb. But that doesn't. I was gonna say that doesn't move the plot forward, but it does, and that's the only reason he does it. And that's right. This is the same thing. This scene is the same thing where it's totally stupid, but it's a shortcut.
Gus deciding to kill Zowie in the manner he does in the first place. I mean, he already rigged the thing up. So you've already had one electrical mishap with the actress dying in the first scene. Yeah. He already rigs the rabbit cage up to be electrified to deter Zowie. Just have it rhyme. Have Zowie get electrocuted by the rabbit cage, and he died because Gus turned the voltage up too high, and he did it on purpose. And he says it was an accident. He set it to horse mode, and it was supposed to be on coyote mode.
And speaking of rhyming, electricity comes up throughout the rest of this movie. I mean, I don't think there's anything really going on there, subtextually, but I'd love it if somebody could find that kind of reading to place over this.
I don't know. But yeah, there's always going to be, stupid stuff. But yeah, this movie is just kind of wild, and that's the way I was able to appreciate it.
Oh, totally.
Just from scene to scene, you either see something that is, good, or you see something that is like, rarely you see a scene that is actually good, maybe. But then, for the most part, you're just seeing something weird. You're seeing something crazy. You're seeing something with a crazy music soundtrack. You're seeing something with amazing visuals. And you said, I think before we started recording, it's a kaleidoscopic experience. And that's a great way to describe it at the movie.
Yeah, I would not at all call this movie bad. I would also not call it good. It's not a bad movie. It is entertaining. It is entertaining. I was entertained throughout.
So something I really got a kick out of in this movie is that, the major, I guess, conflict in this movie is, Gus, the bad sheriff, going to the Pet Sematary and coming back sour. And not having seen the first Pet Sematary movie, I'm sure there's, in the book, there's a story about a kid who got brought back from the Pet Sematary and didn't turn out right. But I assume that it's depicted in the first Pet Sematary movie in flashback. Maybe it's not.
I don't believe so. I think it sticks mostly to the present, except for some intimate character stuff throughout with our protagonists. Yeah.
So this was really our first time seeing an adult come out of the Pet Sematary and seeing what that kind of strange is like. And I thought that was very interesting and, pretty eerie, where, he's like, yeah, he can pass for Gus, but this is not good at all.
Oh, yeah, like he wraps up his neck wound and then literally goes home to rape the mom.
Yeah, and he's got there's this whole dead alive thing going on with like the semen-y goop going through his neck.
Oh, yeah.
Eating. It's like so clear that something's off, and it's hilarious to me that nobody except Drew seems to understand that this guy is like obviously, at the very least, unwell.
Oh, or like the dinner table scene where like he's sitting there just like shoving handfuls of mashed potatoes in his mouth, and then he like throws the lima bean bowl on the floor and lima beans scatter all over the place, and the wife is just like, "Oh, Gus, will you stop?" Like no one realizes that he's acting weird. And then him and Eddie Furlong, whatever his character's name is, and Drew all just like break into this like laughing fit together, and the boys seem to be like genuinely laughing with him, which really came out of nowhere for me.
They think they like him because, this guy's been a hard ass all movie, and now look, he's being silly. He's doing the kind of stuff kids do at the dinner table.
Right.
There's no rules anymore. It's just crazy lobotomized Gus doing, with an evil inside him.
Sure. Yeah. That was hard for me to read in the moment. I guess that makes sense, though. Yeah.
Drew says a line like, something like, oh, like he's great now. Like he's like what I wanted him to be. Because he's being more playful. He knows that like it's fucked up, but he's not getting like verbally and physically abused all the time anymore. So it's like, well, zombie dad's better than live dad. I guess I'll take it.
Yeah.
I also, not having seen the first Pet Sematary movie, I thought the depiction of the Indian burial ground was interesting, but like I didn't like it. And I assume it's the same way in the first movie.
Almost identical, yeah.
But man, that is not the impression I get from reading the book. Like the cool thing to me about the concept of the Pet Sematary is it's like a pretty it's just kind of, it could be in anybody's backyard. It's just this like spot in the woods that the kids know to get to. And this is like, I don't know where you fucking go. You go to the woods and then you find yourself in like the high desert. It looks like the set of the November Rain video, not to mention Guns N' Roses twice in the same episode.
But they have to climb a fucking mountain. It's just like in the remake, like there's a whole route they have to take to get there, and I like that by the time you get there you feel like you're in another world.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I like it just being it's a weird spot, but it's not like, you can't see for miles. I don't know. Just a little hang up I have.
So I haven't read the book, obviously, but I do appreciate like what Patrick was saying, that it does. I do appreciate like filmically the way that it makes you feel like you're going on this journey. Like, how can this place possibly exist out here. Like, it just doesn't even seem to fit the landscape. Like, we're on the moon or something now. I thought that was kind of cool. We're in a
Why
dream
don't they
state.
make the movie so it matches up with the vision I had in my head when I read the book?
Well, and I mean, I have not seen the first one, but I feel like Mary Lambert had to have like kind of set the template for that with the first one, because the remake also has that feeling of climbing over the mountain and getting into this area that feels like, again, in a completely different world. Like when we were in the Pet Sematary and Pet Sematary 2, I felt like I was essentially in the same exact location that you go to in the Pet Sematary remake, which makes me think that all had to have been established and then completely, but it all had to have been established in the first film and then completely cribbed for the remake.
Maybe it is. I don't know. I have to go back to the book. But I mean, I'm sure because it's in all these movies, I feel like maybe it is in the book, but my memory is that it's just kind of like there's this timber pile in the woods that's like you can't cross unless you're got the idea to bury someone in the Pet Sematary. And then you get over the wood and you're in this like a creepier section of the world for sure, but not like, it could still be in your backyard, or it could be in your neighbor's backyard. It could be anywhere. I'm pretty sure now I don't have a Pet Sematary in my backyard because I would notice if there was this giant like UFO landing pad out back.
Well, that's the trouble with adapting King, right? Like he is a great stylist in his own sort of folksy way, and he could describe something in a sentence that could take 10 minutes to show on film in a way like that seems even remotely believable. He does a great job of getting inside the characters' heads and how they experience the places that they're inhabiting without exactly describing them in this really kind of surreal way that I appreciate.
There's some references to the first movie / book in this one, some throwaway references to the Creed family. Some characters talk about kind of what happened there. I didn't find any of that too compelling, but it's there for those of us who like good connective tissue between our sequels. According to Wikipedia, the original concept for this film from Mary Lambert was to have the movie focus on Ellie, who was the survivor of the little girl in the first Pet Sematary. And I guess they didn't think that was going to fly, so they were like, let's use Eddie Furlong. That movie made a lot of money. But
well, and that's an interesting parallel to what happened with the remake, where, spoilers for the remake, skip ahead a couple of minutes if you haven't seen it or listened to us talk about it on the show before. But, I thought it was kind of an interesting take to have Ellie be the zombie and not Gage, because it's a lot easier. There's a lot more you can do with like a 13-year-old girl zombie than you can a 5-year-old boy that can barely act or emote. Right. So I would have loved to see what she would have done with Ellie kind of surviving the events of the original narrative and what happens to her going forward. I think that could be really compelling stuff.
But you can do a lot more with a maniac cop than you can do with a 13-year-old girl. I guess they decided.
Yeah, they must have talked to Larry Cohen about that. And you certainly and you certainly can. I mean, that is where, like, if this movie wasn't bonkers enough to begin with, Tom Clancy as the maniac cop.
Clancy
Brown.
Tom Clancy's Maniac Cop.
You know how many times I've Googled Tom Clancy hoping to find information about Clancy Brown?
Someone should bury Tom Clancy in a Pet Cemetery. Give him come back, write another bestseller. But it's like,
I was going to ask if he's still alive. I have no idea. I mean, I do now, I assume.
No, he died a while ago. He comes back from the dead and he writes a novel where like Arabic people don't nuke America, and people are like, there's something wrong with Tom Clancy.
Sometimes dead is better.
Yeah.
Well, let's review it, and we can get down to the spoiler room and discuss further, because this movie definitely gets a lot crazier almost immediately after the last events that we discussed. Chris, why don't you go first?
All right, I'm going to give it a Q it. This is not a good movie, but it is batshit enough scene to scene that it for the most part, held my attention and could be a fun watch if, especially if you're just kind of hanging out with people and you're not trying to put on high art. Whether it's this kind of over the top electrocution scene in the first 5 minutes, or just the weird choices like, Eddie Furlong smuggling a kitten in his coat pocket to go to school, to, all the stuff that happens with the bullies. And then eventually, as we're going to talk about, Clancy Brown as zombie sheriff, just chewing the scenery, being ridiculous, doing crazy shit. And it only gets more wild from there. There's some good special effects. There's some really insane psychedelic visual sequences that I still don't know why they were in the movie. It's not a good movie, but it's interesting enough to be worth your time. And like I said, I did honestly appreciate, having not seen the first movie, seeing some of these Pet Sematary things that I know and love from the book and from the remake, realized in a new way. So I'll give it a Q it for those reasons. Patrick.
I'll give it a Q it too. I mean, like I said already, not bad, but also not necessarily good. Entertaining. Zombie Clancy Brown was a blast. There are enough interesting creative choices, certainly, to hold my attention and to entertain me. So I don't know. That's all I really have to say. Apologies to our listeners. There's been a lot going on in my life, and I'm functionally pretty brain dead today. So, regular Patrick will be back to his regular, levels of bullshit next episode. Never fear.
We're gonna take him out and we're gonna bury him in the Pet Cemetery.
Yes.
And he's gonna be back in 2 weeks, good as new. It'll work this time.
Yeah,
I know. I can feel it.
I'll be skinning rabbits. All kinds of shit will be going down. Yeah. Steven, what's your rating?
Oh, it's a Q it. I mean, it's a completely bonkers movie that shouldn't exist. It's just wild across the board, completely incompetently executed on every single level. And that makes it fun. That's the kind of movie I like to have a couple of beers with and hang out with my friends and watch and just laugh at. I mean, even scenes that do kind of work, there's like clunky editing or like a weird costume or something. There's like it never really, it's never smooth sailing, even for a minute or so at any given point. And I don't know. Every once in a while, that's just what I need. That's the shot in the arm I'm looking for.
All right. Well, I guess, like we said, we'll go down to the spoiler room now. We'll tell you everything that happens. What does that maniac cop get up to in this movie? We'll explain it all. But first, if you want to check us out online, you should do that. Go to everyhorrormovieonnetflix.com. Check us out there. Follow us at AmonCast, EHMONcast, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Leave us a review. We love having reviews on our podcasts on iTunes or any other podcast service. It helps the show a lot, and we like to know that our fans are out there. And, feel free to drop us a line on social media or email or what have you. And, tell us what you thought about Pet Sematary 2 or, the Pet Sematary franchise in general. We love to hear from our fans.
Yeah.
We sure do.
So let's climb on over that mountain and head on down to the spoiler cemetery.
Yeah, the secret spoiler burial ground.
That looks exactly like the forest we climbed through to get there, just for Chris, because we know Chris likes that.
Yes, great. All right, we will see you in a minute.
All right, so we are here in the spoiler cemetery, ready to spoil everything about Pet Sematary 2, aka Maniac Cop 4.
Are there 3 Maniac Cops?
There are 3 Maniac Cops.
I've never seen the third. I think you have, though, Chris, right?
I did because Joe Bob played 1 and 2, and then Shudder often will have like whatever play streams after Joe Bob's show will like have a connection to what we just watched, and they just played Maniac Cop 3, and I was just vibing at 2:33 in the morning, so I just watched all of Maniac Cop 3.
I'd have done the same thing if I was still awake. I mean, those first two movies are such a treat. I would totally ride that train out.
Yeah. Third one's not as good, but it has some good moments.
Remember when Joe Bob stopped by our booth at Motor City Nightmares?
Inside joke.
Good
There
meme.
was a man in a cowboy hat and a bolo tie who was about the same age who was talking to us for a while.
And Chris was behind the booth while the guy was talking to Chris, and me and Steven were just trolling Chris mercilessly.
Yeah. So here was the delight for Pet Sematary for me. I watched on my fancy Apple TV that I have now, and I didn't want to scroll through Netflix and the clumsy interface to find this movie, so I used the little talk to Siri fucking button on the side of the Apple remote, and I searched for Pet Sematary, and I said Pet Sematary, and it knew to spell it the right way instead of actually saying cemetery.
Amazing.
Because of these movies and being aware of them as a child, I have almost never been able to type out the word cemetery without looking it up first. It's just burned into my brain that there's an A in there where it shouldn't be, and I can't fix it.
I know I talk about Pet Sematary way more than I talk about any other cemetery, so I'm surprised my phone just doesn't autocorrect normal cemetery to Pet Cemetery.
Well, but it's spelled completely differently. I bet if I start to type SEM, I bet cemetery, as in the way Pet Sematary is spelled, shows up in my autocorrect, but in all caps, because I would only put it Pet Sematary in caps because it's a movie title.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my phone knows to correct it to what it should be for the movie. I'm talking about a real cemetery. I have so much trouble with that word. Mm-hmm. But Truman Capote couldn't say the alphabet, so I guess it's not that weird.
Just get cremated. Forget about the whole cemetery thing.
Well, that's my plan. So, maybe this is a little obvious conversation starter for the spoiler room, but we haven't done this before. I don't think we did when we saw the remake in theaters. The Pet Sematary experiment, the Pet Sematary theorem. I mean, would you guys do it for a loved one, a pet? Is there maybe not for everybody, but is there any creature, any person in your life that you would actually do this for? Bury them in the Indian burial ground and have them come back? How desperate? Go ahead. Sorry.
Here's the thing: it's easy to sit on our ass and say no, but when you're in that situation, that's the whole theme of the franchise.
Exactly.
When you're in that situation, the grief takes control, and you do it. Here's what I'll say. I'll say that I had to make end-of-life decisions for my own father.
Right.
And I made them as dispassionately as I could. And I did not try to cling on to that when he was on life support. So,
well, friend of the show, Toby, died, a few months into the pandemic last year, and I've thought about this a lot because Pet Sematary just lives in my mind. It's just such a cultural, kind of staple phenomenon. And I like to think about dark things as I'm falling to sleep. And I've gone back and forth. Would I do it or wouldn't I do it? Because when I see the way Church comes back in the films, he's kind of a shit starter and he's kind of menacing, but Toby could kind of be like that sometimes too. I'm not sure how different it would be. I would say in my early stages of grief for him, 100%. If it was a real Pet Sematary and it was in my backyard, I would have given it a shot. Granted, this was heavy grief. There was a lot going on at the time. I mean, again, we were in the middle of a global pandemic. We still are, but it was scarier and fresher then. And I had some other personal tragedies, relatives dying around the same time. I think at that point in my life, I might have done it.
Yeah, but they don't just come back as shit starters. They come back murderous and, demonic, essentially. I don't know. I mean, I've lost a couple of pets who are very dear to me. I don't know. I guess I really haven't lost any humans I was close enough to even have this be a question. But I don't know. I think, yeah, dead. I mean, dead isn't better than alive, obviously, but dead is better than, undead zombie Pet Sematary being.
Well, I think it matters. I think it depends on the demeanor of the animal or person that you're putting in the pet cemetery. You know, if you have someone who, it's like, all right, how can this be defiled? You know, my cats that I have now are pretty sweet. Like, I don't see them coming back the same from the pet cemetery. If you have a cat who's a little bit more standoffish and acts like he wants to kill you more, maybe you have less to lose by putting him in that pet cemetery. But, you know, the way I interpret the pet cemetery is that your thing is not coming back. It is a dark, demonic, undead entity that is wearing this person like a costume and can retain sort of like the black suit in Spider-Man, kind of retains their memories. But it's not that person at all. Yes,
Does it retain any sense of the personality? Like,
that's what I just clumsily tried to articulate with my Spider-Man analogy, which
I didn't get.
But yeah, the costume knows.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's got all that in there. It just has different motives.
So you can play the bit, but like, I mean, vividly, there's a part in the book at least where it's like, oh look, oh cute, the cat's back, oh cute, the baby's back, and then there's a part where no, they kind of take the mask off and they're both demons and they're on the same page and they're working together to kill people. You know.
Well, anyways,
speaking of killing people,
Clancy Brown kills someone with a dirt bike, and it's like one of the greatest things I've seen this year so far.
Well, I can say it now. That scene is the reason I wanted to see this movie. My childhood best friend Dan, who is still had in his short lifetime probably saw more horror movies than I have to this day, and he was watching this kind of shit when he was 13 years old. And thankfully introduced me to a lot of it. I remember him telling me, I didn't know what the fuck Pet Sematary was. I hadn't seen the first movie, and he told me about Edward Furlong's in Pet Sematary 2, and there's this scene where a guy like rips up a kid's face with a dirt bike. I've been living with my own image of that in my head for 20 years at this point. And I just, once it popped up on Netflix, I just had to click. I had to see, and it didn't quite live up to my imagination. It wasn't as brutal as I expected, but man, what a fucking scene. What a set piece. You know, beginning with the bicycle first, as the bully is about to scuff up, is it Drew or is it Eddie? I can't remember.
Eddie. It's Eddie.
He's about to scuff up Eddie's face with the bike, and you're like, actually he wants to take his nose off with the spokes. I'm like, ooh, that's pretty bad.
And actually, that's a pretty good scene to begin with, because that's when the bully is chasing Furlong's on a bicycle, the bully's on the dirt bike, right? And there's kind of a chase scene.
Yeah, there's a chase scene. Furlong gets, thrown off the road, down into a ravine. The bully's going to fuck him up with the
Sarah
bike.
Fear's grave.
Then, inexplicably, Clancy Brown just happens to be in the woods in that exact same spot in the middle of nowhere to show up and get revenge.
I thought the chase scene was pretty competently staged. I don't know, it felt complicated to me, having two child actors, one of them on a bicycle, one of them on a dirt bike, and I thought it was pretty well staged. It pretty effectively communicated the danger of the kid on the dirt bike trying to run the kid on the bicycle off the road, and I felt some concern for... What's his name? What's our protagonist's name? We just
Eddie Furlong.
We established that at the beginning of the
What's his name, though?
Jeff Matthews.
Jeff. Okay, yeah. But yeah, then oh my god, it's. I mean, like, yeah, Clancy Brown just like picks up the dirt bike and like rams it into the bully's face as he like revs the throttle. Oh man, it's so extreme. I loved it.
It is, but to Mary Lambert's
gory,
credit,
though.
It's not, because it cuts away quickly. Like, you get a couple of brushes where you're like, ooh, this is going to be bad. It's getting really close to his face. And then when you hear it hit his face, it cuts away.
Yeah.
So it could have been a lot more extreme. I don't know. I I have a sense that there's a gorier cut of this where that's played out. I'm not sure, but I did appreciate the restraint in that moment.
There's plenty of gore in this movie, though. I was not dissatisfied with the goriness.
Well, do we want to talk about the rabbits and their fate? I mean, that was probably the most extreme thing in the whole movie.
I'm pretty sure the ASPCA was not on set for this movie because I think some rabbits were actually slaughtered.
I think that the animals were harmed. I mean, that had to be real. I mean, just the, it was the you could see the knife cutting through what seemed to be like very real sinew. Like, I don't know how you can fabricate something like that.
Yeah, I mean, so we should explain it. When Clancy Brown gets full into zombie cop mode, he decides to just slaughter his entire cage full of rabbits that he's been raising for the entire movie. And I mean, the one that has its neck snapped is clearly either a dummy rabbit or an already dead rabbit. But yeah, see a whole lot of skin get pulled off what appear to be actual rabbits.
Yep.
And then they eat them the next scene. And honestly, I was slightly grossed out, but I was also like, I want to eat some of that rabbit meat.
Oh, rabbit's great. My dad hunts rabbits, and in the fall we'll have like rabbit stew, and I go down to see my family. It's delicious.
Well,
but I don't want to be there I don't want to be there for the skinning or any of that, though. I just want to eat the aftermath.
Yeah.
The fair's in town. Small animal auction is Saturday. You can go get a little pen of meat rabbits and fuck around and find out.
But he just said he doesn't want to see this.
Yeah, exactly. That's the last thing I want to do.
He wants to be disconnected
meat,
from the process. Yeah, I've had it only once, but it was quite tasty, quite tender.
There were some time capsule elements in this movie that I appreciated. Like, in 1992, like if there was a kid, like a school age kid who had an earring, that was bad fucking news. Right?
Yeah.
And so
I knew that kid.
The lead bully has an earring, so away that he's up to no good. This is also
he went to the piercing pagoda at the mall.
Like we were talking last time about, all the profanity in the Fear Street trilogy, and you got kids talking like it's a Tarantino movie, but like the 90s were an era where you would see an R-rated movie with kids in it, and they would like a couple of them would say fuck, and it would be like you could almost hear a record scratch. Like, it's like, look what we just made this kid say. Isn't this incredible? You get that in here a couple times.
Well, as opposed to, another King, well, I shouldn't say another King adaptation. This isn't one. It pretends to be, but Stand By Me has a lot of profanity in it. And I remember that being really pivotal to me as a kid, thinking like, I was probably about the age of those kids, and it gave the movie a more of a weight to me because I didn't know that you were allowed to talk like that, and it felt, there's some kind of 50s slang in that's a little bit goofy, but seeing kids like swearing and smoking cigarettes kind of blew my mind. And in this movie, it feels like anytime the kids do behave like actual kids, it's sort of a stunt. It's like meant to shock you, whereas otherwise they act pretty docile.
Well, and then they have their party in the woods, and these are like 14-year-old kids, if that. And like, Gus shows up. He's like, "Are you kids drinking?" It's like it's implied they're all drinking and smoking in the woods, even though they're all like 13.
Yeah, and they're not. They're just like listening to the story of the fucking Pet Sematary and the Wendigo and all that shit. No, they don't mention the Wendigo, do they?
No.
That was a big disappointment. I was hoping, because spoilers for the first film, I don't even think it touches on the Wendigo, which I know is part of the novel, right, Chris?
Yes.
I was really hoping that this...
Implied Wendigo, anyway.
Implied, and nothing better than an implied Wendigo. And I really thought this movie is so over the top and so doubling down on everything, even thematically, from the source material in the first movie. I thought we're gonna get a Wendigo. It's gonna happen. Doesn't happen. Very disappointed.
A little disappointing. Yeah. I would make 2 changes to this movie to have it be more fun. One would be, this is the dumbest shit I've ever said on this show, but one would be they're having their party at night and the kid's telling them the story of the Pet Sematary. He should have literally had the book Pet Sematary.
What?
That's dumb. But here's a good idea that's actually good. You add a sheriff's deputy
Winston.
So Gus has you have Gus has a deputy who like tags along with Gus, and even when Gus goes nuts, the quote unquote good cop just follows along and like goes with him up to a certain point when he eventually turns on him and then gets killed. That'd be funny.
That'd be funny.
Not quite my tempo, and neither of those has quite turned the dial for me.
Chris, I admire the attempt. I don't know how to fix this movie.
I'm not saying that would fix it. I'd just add more sauce on top of the.
Oh, I mean that's all you could really do. Yeah, you can't fix it. You could add more sauce, but man, this thing gets so fucked up so quickly that I still don't even fully. Like, I know what happened, I just don't understand how it happened.
Okay, You know what did turn the dial for me was when Clancy Brown basically forces Drew and his mom to drive their car into a giant truck full of potatoes, and they just get plastered by the potato truck. There's an avalanche of potatoes. Like, Final Destination wishes it could have come up with this as a bizarrely obscure way for people to die. The Jesus and Mary Chain song, to which the lyrics are "I want to die like JFK," I think are the words, is blasting. Because we all know JFK
died under a pile of potatoes. Let's be clear about that. I mean, it could not have been more literal.
I was screaming. This scene was wild. I loved it.
It was insane. And it just like kept doubling down, seeing the avalanche of potatoes, like cutting back to it over and over again, and then the bloody legs sticking out from the potato.
I think I was especially shocked because I thought they were going to make it. I was like, we love Drew. Drew is Jeff's best friend. I thought maybe the mom wouldn't make it, but to see them both just get absolutely destroyed by this potato truck was shocking and hilarious in equal measure.
Chris, I know you were going to jump in with something, but I have a really serious question. Is Maine known for its potato production? Like, do they grow potatoes up there? Is that a big deal?
They got to get them bust in from somewhere if they don't grow them themselves.
But do they really come in like that?
I wonder how they came up with the farm.
I don't think this movie was approved by the ASPCA nor the Idaho Potato Commission.
I just wonder how they even came up with potatoes. Like, where did that idea come from?
Well, I just Googled Maine potato, and the first thing that came up is from I don't even know how to pronounce this website, so I don't know if it's reputable, but the potato is northern Maine's primary agricultural product. And in the 1940s, Maine's potato production was top in the nation.
All right.
Wow.
So, yeah, there we go.
Potatoes out the ass in Maine.
I mean, is it actually stated in the text of the movie that we're in Maine?
I don't think so, but the county, it takes place in Ludlow, which I was like, oh, that's Maine. I know enough about Maine that I know where Ludlow is, even though it's like the middle of fucking nowhere. I feel like that's probably just from reading a lot of Stephen King. But there were times where I questioned it, and there was something in it that made me think it was set outside Chicago at a certain point, and I thought, they can't do that. The Pet Sematary doesn't just move. Like, it's not like the celestial entity that can just show up wherever it needs to. But I was confused a couple of times too, is what I'm saying.
Talking about this is making me want to read some King. It's been a little while, and I just want... I'm having this really strong sense memory of reading different King books right now, and I want to feel that way again. So I think I'm going to read something of his soon.
You should read Pet Sematary.
I should.
I'll read it too, and we can have a Patreon. Well, we can't say that, but we can have our own little book club on the side.
You know what? We're going to have a Patreon book club. I think we can say that. It's going to happen soon.
Fuck, where do we go from there? Because it gets really dreamlike and weird at a certain point where, like, Edward Furlong suddenly becomes kind of a minion of evil. He's, like, strangely possessed in a way that doesn't really make sense to me.
I don't know about that.
We get some dreamy stuff where, like, there's grass at the pet cemetery. There's that scene where, like, his mom's tombstone shows up there, and, like, it seems to be played as if that's his actual experience with it.
It's just a mess.
Wait, Edward Furlong is a minion of evil? I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, he becomes evil toward the end.
He gets slightly moodier than he was before.
But suddenly he's wearing a suit, like he's at the funeral, and he's at his dead mom's beck and call, and it like just doesn't make any sense. It's so strange.
Anthony Edwards has sex with a woman who transforms into a dog.
Let's talk about that.
That was amazing.
That is
the dog, and the dog jumps out the window like Dracula, and he tries to shoot the dog. It was crazy.
You know what? That scene was amazing because at first I was like, okay, male gaze much? Like, here's just like a literal tit shot of him just grabbing her titties, and then it pans up. Turns out it's just a good misdirect because there's a huge wolf head on the body of the woman he thinks he's having sex with, and it's a great fake out, great moment.
Yeah, that scene is so weird, and I want to watch it again because I don't know, it feels rapey, similarly, not quite similarly, but like close to the zombie rape earlier in the film, where it's just like this weird sex that we're not expecting, and then there's this supernatural element tied on top of it, and I don't know what actually happened in that scene. Like, the dog got into his place, and he had sex with something. Was it the dog, and the dog made him think it was his wife? It's so strange.
I don't know, man.
I don't even know how to talk about it in a way that's remotely PC, because it's not. It turns out
it's been a day, and it's been 2 days since I've seen this movie, and I already didn't fully remember the details of the climax. And at this point, I feel like I'm literally losing my mind. So you tell me what happened. The mom comes back.
She does,
and is evil. Looking great.
Yeah, because and the whole thing where Gus was talking about the prom and the homecoming and everything, I think that's there to set up that once Gus becomes an agent of evil, he actually digs up, he has motivation to dig up the wife and bring her back. And so he actually, takes the wife to the pet cemetery. Eddie Furlong shows up at the pet cemetery. They bury the wife. The wife comes back. And it's kind of, from there, it's pretty rote Pet Sematary stuff. They go to the house. There's kind of a convergence of all the bad guys. Anthony Edwards, not Anthony Hopkins, like I almost said, kills Gus. The bully comes back from the dead because Gus buried the bully too. There's some action. There's some gore. People die.
Right. I didn't even recognize the bully when he came back from the dead. I was like, who is this?
Took me a minute too. For a minute, I was like, is this a character from the first movie?
He looks like I don't know, for some reason he looked like an adult man to me.
He did.
In a weird way. But then I was like, oh yeah, he got his face fucked up by the wheel. That makes sense. But it took me a couple of secs.
Yeah, I mean, he has semen coming out of his eye.
Yeah. Again, with the Evil Dead, Dead Alive sort of weird semen instead of blood. Mm-hmm. I hope that means something, and I hope I figure it out someday, but it probably doesn't.
But, none of it's very good. I guess lessons are learned, right? Because when the chips are down, Eddie Furlong decides, nah, that's not my mom after all. She can die. She can melt in a fire, and I'll go off, and my dad and I will close down our shop and get out of town. But it's, this is more like, what movie I'm going to be audacious and compare this to?
I don't. Tell me.
Mandy.
What?
This is a movie that's not plot forward. It's more like...
It's expressionistic.
It's expressionistic.
But I would say
totally
accidentally so.
Thank you, Patrick.
It makes perfect sense to me, but I don't feel like... I would love to interview Mary Lambert and throw that term at her and have her just say, look, I didn't have any fucking control over this thing. This is just what happened. This is what they let me release.
What if this is what she wanted to do?
I mean, maybe, but we know that from the beginning she didn't get to make the movie she wanted to make, right? Because when Pet Sematary was a huge success, in spite of all the odds, she wanted to make a movie that focused on Ellie, and they didn't let her do it. So this just feels like, in so many ways, it feels like so many different studio heads meddling, trying to figure out what they needed in a movie that would make a successful follow-up. And that final 20 minutes feels like they kind of all had their say in some way. I don't know for sure, obviously. I would love to talk to her or find an interview or something, but it doesn't feel like there's any one hand in control.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, maybe we can get a hold of her.
I would love to try. I mean, I've seen interviews with her before. She seems like an awesome person, but I am pretty sure she's been on record saying she's not happy with this film. And I would love to know what could have been.
Yeah.
But yeah, it gets real weird in that end scene. It gets kind of dreamy. We get stuff with. We didn't even go back to the maid. Like, just she's told to like lay low for a while. So what does she do? She goes upstairs and just cosplays as the dead mom.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think it was implied that she looks like the dead mom.
Yes.
Yeah, and so again, that's kind of another subplot. There's kind of subplots on subplots in this movie and it's it does feel like 6 different visions of the movie kind of chopped up together, and now you're swallowing it.
I did watch this with a friend last night, and he had this idea, and I kind of see it too, that all of the major female characters kind of have a similar look to them, like almost as if they're interchangeable as far as their physical features go. And I think there might actually be something to that. I mean, that was just him kind of explaining his dreamlike experience of seeing this movie. But I did think at the end, like, wow, she actually looks convincingly like the mom. And I just wonder, knowing that this was, made by a female filmmaker, and knowing that there's a lot of like abuse toward women in this movie, that maybe there's some kind of commentary there that doesn't quite get through, but maybe in the roots somewhere.
I mean, it ends with a woman screaming, "Dead is better. Dead is better."
Yeah, I couldn't be more on the nose than that.
I mean, that's it. That's your movie. I mean, it's again, like, there's not.
It's fucked up. It's weird. It's hard to talk about.
It is difficult to talk about, just because it's just so kind of disjointed. But at the end of the day, you see some crazy shit. You see Clancy Brown killing kids. You see kids with earrings saying "fuck." You see women melting.
Oh, what about so an often oft-quoted line from this movie is "No brain, no pain," when Clancy Brown takes a drill to Anthony Edwards' open wound on his shoulder.
Is that oft-quoted? I've never heard that before.
I mean, in certain circles, it's just such a, like, that's a standout moment for me, of like, they're trying to also cash in, it seems like, on like the Freddy franchise. Like, oh, he's got to have catchphrases.
Gotta have one-liners. Yeah. I did like the reanimated bully getting electrocuted until his head explodes.
Yeah.
Which I wish the mom's head had exploded in the first scene. That would have gotten my attention. She got electrocuted with probably more volts than the bully kid.
The drill to the shoulder. The drill to the shoulder was intense.
Well, the capper to all this is the final scene. So it's Eddie and I'm trying to remember. Because this movie is a fever dream. Who survives at the end of this?
Does Edward Furlong go by Eddie? Why do we keep calling him Eddie?
People call him Eddie. Yeah, he goes by Eddie, I guess.
He did at the time, anyway.
Oh, okay. I've never heard.
Who does he survive with at the end of the movie? Who gets away with him in the car?
His dad.
His dad, right? Okay, so his dad does.
Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, they drive off. We get this kind of like, it feels like a callback to The Shining, with the helicopter shot of the car driving through the trees, and then we get these like little these little oval shots superimposed of the least flattering possible little clips of everyone who's died during the movie.
That was amazing. That was like American Graffiti. I wanted a little like text on the screen to like memorialize each of them.
I totally forgot about that, but yeah, that was hilarious.
That was amazing.
Screaming.
What a choice.
Again, like just a stylistic touch that you cannot make any sense of, and you've never seen before. And there's plenty of that in Pet Sematary.
It's singular. I mean, it's an auteur effort. It's, it approaches brilliance in its strange choices.
Sure.
Eddie Furlong was cast for Terminator 2 just at a YMCA. They saw him at the YMCA, and they liked his look, and they said, "Hey, you ever think about acting?"
And he was like, "No, but I can look good on camera."
Basically.
He's awful in this for the most part.
So, well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, because I was thinking about that. Like his performance in Terminator 2 is good, but not super consistent, and then here it's very inconsistent. I mean, I think he had talent, but yeah, he's not an actor, and he's doing the best he can, So that's some important context.
Yeah, I thought he was fine.
He was fine. I mean, I did say earlier that I think the scene where he screams as his mother is being electrocuted is, I mean, I think that's maybe the most impactful piece of acting in the entire movie. I was kind of like shook by that, especially in contrast to how hilariously subdued the mother's performance was during that scene. So,
the best piece of acting in the movie is Clancy Brown shoving a whole spoon of mashed potatoes into his face. Best actor. That's your clip right there.
Well, okay, last piece of trivia I have about this movie. Clancy Brown was not nominated for many awards for this film, perhaps only one, which was the Fangoria Chainsaw Award for Best Supporting Actor, which I found hilarious. I don't know what the competition was except for Anthony Hopkins in Bram Stoker's Dracula. He took away the Chainsaw Award that year. But I find it so interesting that those two were in competition with each other for something.
I love that. Well-deserved nomination. My boy, Clancy. Hank from, what's that game?
Detroit Become Human.
That's right.
Yes, a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's Pet Sematary 2. We're going to bury that and never think of it again. What are we watching next week, Chris? I think it's your turn to choose.
It's the wheel's turn, isn't it?
Well, oh, yeah, that makes sense because we had kind of a special episode that you chose. Okay. What's the wheel got for us?
We are watching Pag 9 Lives.
What the fuck is that?
Maybe Pog 9 Lives. It's a Filipino film.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
After ignoring superstitions, a group of teenagers find themselves in a fight for their lives when they are haunted and hunted by an evil spirit.
Well, that doesn't sound unfamiliar.
We've seen that movie before, but have we seen it from the Philippines?
We have not. All right. Well.
All right.
We'll be back.
So that's what we'll be doing.
We'll be back in 2 weeks for Pog 9 Lives. Am I getting there?
Pog 9 Lives. I hope Pog is a cat.
Jesus, me too. All right. Well, it's been fun. For every horror movie on Netflix, I'm Steven.
I'm Chris.
I'm Patrick.
Bye.